let's see. I just did this once before and it wasn't working, and it's doing the same thing again. Oh, okay. I think it's working. Y'all, I'm going to check in the group. I just talked to myself for like 5 minutes and realized that there was a connection issue. so so that happened. So let me just make sure. Yes, okay, I can see this in the group. Oh, that's so exciting. I was worried we were going to have one of those days where the tech just didn't want to work. We're just going to blame it on the heat or something like that. I am so happy to be here with y'all. What I was saying, and this is not what today's live stream is about at all, but what I just spent 5 minutes talking to myself about is I wanted to thank you for whether you're here live or on the replay, for being here, for being a part of my world. I was just saying, I'm always grateful for my business and for my work, but outside of serving clients, which is my favorite thing, getting to hang with you, getting to share these ideas, these concepts, getting to connect with you is such a joy and like highlight of my week. It's one of my favorite things to do. I was just saying, I've just been in a time of particular gratitude for my business. And I was just thinking, I think sometimes in the online space, we can get so wrapped around, what the issues are and the challenges in the industry and this year and chasing more and we're not making enough and all of those things. And I don't think we always take the time to just stop and say, like, how amazing is it that we can, like, that we live in this time where we can run businesses online and connect with each other. And I just, this weekend, I had 2 clients in town I got to see. One's a longtime dear friend who I also work with. And then another is a client who's become a dear friend who we've worked together for 5 or 6 years. I got to hug them in person and spend time with them. And I was thinking, wow, like what a joy that I got to spend my weekend doing that, but also what a joy that my business let me do that I found something that feels like my purpose, my life's work, my passion, that I get to make money from that I also get to hang out with people, and that we connected because of the internet. Anyway, I'm just in a little bit of a gratitude thing. If you're a client of mine, sometimes I talk about obnoxious gratitude. There's some of my obnoxious gratitude for you. But that's not what we're talking about today. It just felt important to say. Today we're going to dive into the number one thing that has helped me or made me feel unstoppable in business, and it's helped me to sell more. It's helped me to scale without taking on other people's stuff. I think I've talked about this in other ways before, but I don't know that I've actually really had this conversation in this way with y'all. And it's something I've been noticing with clients quite a bit when I see just what kind of unlocks business for them and makes things feel a lot easier and makes it easier for them to run at results and makes it easier for them to scale. It's oftentimes this piece that we're really unlocking. And I've had this conversation with quite a few clients recently, and so I thought it'd be worth bringing here. I was thinking, if you're on my email list, you got the email for this. I was thinking about how different my business feels today. I've been in business for 9.5 years. March will be 10 years that I've been in business, and I've been coaching for about 1.5 years before that. So I don't know, what does that make that? 10.5, 11 years. So I've been doing this for a long time. And I'm a dinosaur in the online space. That also ages me, but we're cool with that. I, as a side note, I very much believe that we get better with age. So I don't have an issue with aging. But to what we were talking about, I was just thinking about my early years in business and how I would say the first 1, 2, 3 years in business, how heavy things felt. Not because I didn't like what I did. I mean, I started this business not to like escape the 9 to 5 or not to like make gazillions of dollars. I started this business because I fell in love with coaching. Obviously, otherwise I wouldn't still only have a one-on-one coaching model. I would have definitely scaled out of that at this point. Coaching changed my life personally, and then just seeing the transformative power of it and just getting to support people and like witness those transformations and be on the side of it to facilitate that lights me up in a way I can't describe. And so it just feels like, purpose sounds so cheesy, but it feels like my purpose. So that was never an issue for me. Alignment was never an issue for me in business. But I'd say the first couple of years for business, so many things felt heavy. Like everything I did, I think I put in the email, I'm definitely a recovering perfectionist, people pleaser, overthinker. We've talked about that in different ways in this group before. A lot of that, gone to a lot of therapy and done a lot of therapy and coaching around. A lot of that has to do with trauma responses and things like that we don't need to unpack today. But because of that, business felt so heavy, and every time I would put something out, I would worry about what people thought. Every time I sold, and I barely sold, but like if I would even like hint at selling something, I was like really worried about being salesy or like annoying my email list. If I had a client call with someone and they weren't like getting perfect results, or they were frustrated, or they were having a hard time, I could hold it in the session, but I would really take that home and stay up at night replaying the session, worrying about that. I remember, so the first, I'd say until we started running ads, one of our strategies was posting content in other Facebook groups. I think a lot of y'all do that. A lot of you use this group for that, right? Which I hope you do. Like, please find your next client in this group. I remember I probably spent, I probably spent so many sessions with my poor coach at the time where all I was trying to unwind was my worry and fear about what the owner of this Facebook group would think if I was posting my content in there, because I didn't want to piss them off. I didn't know what they would think. Like, there was just so much wrapped up around not upsetting people. Like, what would they think? Taking on people's projections. And so it just made business really, really heavy. And so while there were myriad, like, it's never one thing that leads to unlocking our first 10K month or our first 20K month. And I would not say like that is the only thing that made business hard, but I definitely made business harder than it needed to be because of that. And I'm going to explain what that one thing is in a moment, but I wanted to give a little context there, because I also find, and again, I'm always so mindful in these conversations because I'm not coaching one-on-one. I never want to make it sound like, and then I unlocked this one thing and my business blew up, and that's why I've been fully booked for 6.5 years with 20 to 25 clients. That's why I've made $1.7 million. Like, there are myriad factors that go into that, and what I unlocked here definitely is a big catalyst for that, because when business felt heavy and hard, it made all of the things that make running your business and booking clients and making that sustainability so much heavier and harder. Right? If it was affecting my content, it was affecting even what I would say in my content. I worried so much about taking up space and sharing results or sharing what I was good at and like ruffling feathers and pissing people off and being bold, right? If all of that is being affected, if it's affecting my sales, if it's affecting how much I'm taking on from clients, that literally affects my capacity in terms of my roster, right? Everything is being affected. Of course, then when you unlock that piece, it allows you to run at the strategy for content, taking up more space, owning your work, selling more directly, holding more clients, without burning out, expanding your capacity, all of that. So there is that direct link, and I can tell you, like, I can see when this started to shift, because everything in business started feeling a lot easier. And I think that's helpful to say, because I think sometimes, look, there are aspects, I will not gaslight anyone, there are aspects of business that are just hard, and there are aspects of business that have a learning curve, and it can feel challenging when we're in the learning curve. But there's a lot in business that is very simple, and there's a lot in business that I see, I've done this in the past, I see this through clients, that we make so much harder than it needs to be. And this is that. So I've been teasing this out. Let me stop teasing this out and share what this is. And if you have questions or anything, let me know. And if you're listening to this in the vault, in the replay, if you have a question on this, because I know in that you're listening to this privately, feel free to hit reply to an email if you have a question, reflection, something you want me to cover in an upcoming live or anything like that. So happy to do that. Oh, and I am the worst, I'm not the worst business person. Because we had our tech fail, I was going to announce, I got a really special free thing that I'm announcing soon that I'm so excited to share it with y'all. And it's a way that some of you will be able to get some free coaching. Probably announcing that we're putting together a couple like final pieces for it, so I'll probably announce it in the next week or two, but just keep your ears tuned for that. That was my announcement I needed to share at the beginning. Anyway, let me bring us back to our conversation here. So I'm going to share what this is, and it's going to sound very simple, but I actually want to tease it apart a little bit. And then I'm going to share, I shared a little bit of some of the ways it shows up for me, but some of the ways it shows up for me, my clients. And then I want to share more just about how I think about this and unhooking from this, because I think it's one thing for me to tell you, it's another thing to know how to unhook from it. So in the past, and I think I've shared this part with you, so this is not the thing, but I feel like this is just important to give context around as well. In the past, I think what I've talked about is just this idea of being able to hold clients without holding all of their stuff, or carrying, like I care, C-A-R-E, about clients versus carrying all their stuff. And that is definitely on the coaching side of things been very, very helpful to me as a concept. But that didn't really help me with the marketing side of things and the sales side of things and the visibility sides of things. And even the crunchiness I think that can come up when we start to have more and more success. I think we don't talk enough about, like, that can hit a lot of edges for us, and a lot of worthiness stuff, and a lot of, oh my gosh, I'm not working hard enough for this, whatever. That can kick up a lot that we've talked about in different ways. And with that, and I guess to like help bridge the explanation here, what I saw for myself is when you're good at what you do, and when you're helping people, and when you're showing up in a bigger way, even if you do all the things right in air quotes, it's also very normal to get projections from people. My friend Julia Wells, she claims it as, or she says it really well. She says, just thinking of how she frames it. She sort of frames it as like you have to be willing to be the villain in someone's story. And I think that's just helpful. It's just a helpful context and frame to say it's just really normal for people to project on you. And so that's a lot to hold, but that is different than holding clients in a client session where you're holding space for them versus holding all of their stuff. And so that was just hard for my brain. And one of the things that I started to land on that really, really supported me is starting to see that that was because I was making everything so personal in my business and taking everything really personal. And the truth is, in business and with whatever work we do, whether you're a coach or a therapist or not, or you do something, you design websites, or you are a brand designer, or you're an accountant, everything we do in business, while it might be personal to us, because what I was saying at the beginning of this live stream, right? We love our work. It's our life's passion. It's our purpose. We love our clients. This is our mission. It's our message, right? Like, it can feel very personal in that way, right? We want to have that personal connection in marketing. Business itself is not personal, and people's projections and what people think of us usually is not personal, even if we feel like it's personal and we make it mean something personal. And I'm going to try to tease this out to help this make more sense. But just to kind of land the plane, my new favorite phrase on this concept, overall, again, yes, we can feel deeply personally connected to our clients. We can feel like our work is deeply personal. My work is very personal to me. And at the end of the day, my business is not personal, and things that happen in my business are not personal. They are not about Kim the human. They are about the business, right? And when a client projects on me, as they will, because I'm a coach, and that is just one of those normal human reactions, or when someone in my audience or someone on social media projects on me, as they will, because that is just such a normal human reaction, that is not personal. It might feel very personal, especially if they project in a way that feels more like an attack or something like that, right? It might feel very personal, especially if I take it on and I think there's truth in it, but it is not actually personal. If anything, it has more to do with whoever is projecting upon me and what's going on in their world and their psyche and their past and their history and their trauma, right? And it is being projected upon me, like whatever their trigger is, right? It is, if anything, it's more personal to them than it is personal to me. So when I started to understand this, it made it a lot easier to start to separate myself from my business while still feeling really personally connected. I know that sounds like kind of counterintuitive. Maybe it's a little nuanced, so let me know if that doesn't make sense. But again, like, I just hugged and said I love you to two of my clients this week. And I tell most of my clients, like, I mean, when it's appropriate, that I love them. I have close relationships with people. I connect with people in the audience and will be in DMs with people. I'm talk to many of my clients every day in Basecamp, right? It is a very personal business. I have a very deep personal connection, but I also know whatever money I made this month or last month is not personal, right? That is just about the business. I know that we already use the client projector. If a client comes on and they're really triggered in a session, or they're really upset about something in their business, or they're even upset about a result I've gotten that is triggering in some way, that is not personal about me at all. That is just a human normal reaction. If I post something on social media, if I post in a Facebook group, right, the thing that used to like really like get me worked up, that I had a huge fear around, and let's just say a group owner doesn't like that, it's not actually personal. It makes me think of the I don't know if this is quite bridge, but the movie The Godfather, when it's like, what is the line? It's like, it's not personal, it's strictly business. I shouldn't say this out loud. I don't know if I've actually seen The Godfather. I just know that quote. So in that way, like many of these things, what I just like to think is it's not personal, it's strictly business. But even in that way, it's not personal in that it's usually more about the person and their stuff than it is us and our business. Because if it really was about us and our business, and this is one of the things I like to remember, if I was really doing something wrong, if I really upset a Facebook group owner and I like broke the rules or whatever, if something that someone said to me about a piece of content in a comment was really true and an issue, it still wouldn't be personal. It would just be something about my business that I need to clean up, and I would be willing to clean it up. Like, it wouldn't be an issue, right? It would just be something where I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I mistook a Facebook group rule. Let me change that. Let me change what I'm doing there. Let me apologize and clean that up. Oh, I missed a deadline for a client accidentally because I'm human. Let me apologize. Let me make that right for them. Let me clean that up. Oh, I wrote something in a piece of content that I was mistaken about, or I was, I had my facts wrong, or like I have a different perception because I'm human and that happens. Great. Like, let me, or like I said something that was inappropriate. Like, let me clean that up with the person, right? But that still wouldn't be personal. That would just be that would just be an easy thing to address. And so anything else, I'm hoping this is really landing for you. Anything else that we're carrying and taking on, what happens is we often make it personal, right? We make it mean something about us as a person, our worth, if we're good enough, if people like us or not, or we take on someone else's personal stuff and we feel this need to. I was talking about the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the overcompensation, right? We then have these self-defense mechanisms as a way to, because we feel uncomfortable, because we are taking on someone's projection, because we are taking on someone's stuff, because we are taking on someone else's personal stuff that isn't personal about us, or it isn't about us at all, right? Let me think of a better way to explain this. If me, Kim, if I project on someone else, I could project on 100 different people, basically the same thing. It has nothing to do about the person I'm projecting on. It has everything to do with me and what's going on with me. So that's what I'm trying to explain there. And that's a nuance here. Of course, this doesn't mean don't take personal responsibility when something is, again, like we were talking about, when there is something we need to clean up. But in this context here, so if then something is, if we're getting feedback in some way, as you will in business, you put something out in business, you always will get feedback, right? You put out a piece of content, you're going to get feedback. You're going to get no likes, or you're going to get tons of likes or engagement, right? But either way, that's feedback. You're going to put out sales material, you're going to get feedback. You're going to get sales, or you're going to get no sales. But right, your data is feedback. So when we get feedback in our business, if it feels really crunchy, oftentimes it's because we're making it personal and we're making it mean something about us. And when we make it personal, as opposed to this is feedback in my business, and that I need to look at, is this either something personal to the person who's leaving the feedback, or just something about the business I need to address, like clean data, right, that I need to address. When we instead make it something personal about us and make it mean something about us, how good we are, our worthiness, our likability, our safety, right? These are things that are very deeply personal. Then we tend to have a response that is a self-defense mechanism, right? Perfectionism is a fear response. I'm now going to try to make everything as perfect as humanly possible so I don't ever get this feedback from another person. I am now going to people please and try to overcompensate or overfunction or take over certain things, because I'm hoping if I do that, someone can never have a bad experience, project on me, get upset at me, right? Because I'm making this very personal about me. So this is my self-defense mechanism. I feel really uncomfortable in this. I've made this really personal, mean something about me. I'm going to actually retreat. I'm never going to send another follow-up again. I'm never going to sell again. I'm never going to talk about this thing in my content again, because I clearly was too bold. I'm making this about me. I was too big. I was too much. I was too bold. I ruffled feathers. So I'm going to, as a protection mechanism, I'm going to retreat. I'm going to play small. I'm going to dim my light, right? So we can see how when we make things personal about us as a human, as opposed to seeing something as either personal about the person leaving the feedback or neutral data in our business to look at and respond to, we get into these very personal responses, personal, I would say, self-defense protective mechanisms that can cause a lot of issues in our business. And oftentimes when I was just having this conversation with a client about follow-ups, and follow-ups are feeling so sticky because of the feedback on the other side. And what we were talking about is how normal this feedback is, and how this feedback has nothing to do with her and her business. It's just really normal. But the more she was taking that feedback to mean something about her business, the like worthiness of her work, how much people like her, right? The more she was then creating a personal response and reaction, which for her was going to want to be to retreat and not to send any more follow-ups, when really all that was going on is we were just getting a lack of feedback, because it turned out some people were just in the decision-making process and needed a little bit more time to think. And what they really needed was for her not to take that personally, not to make that about her, and instead to make that about them, right? It is about them. In this case, not even their stuff and their triggers, but just where they're at in the sales process, so that she could lean in, so that she could follow up, so that she could support them and give them what they needed to be able to make that sale. So hopefully that makes sense there, because I find the more we can see this and separate this out, the easier it is to take the appropriate action in your business that gets you all the results you want. I think that follow-up example is such a great reaction, because generally speaking, when we make things personal about us in business, and again, I want you to think, it doesn't mean that things can't, your work can't feel personal. But when we take things on personally and make it mean something about us, we then tend to have a reaction, right? That fight, flight, freeze, fawn. So we tend to either fight, I'm going to overdo action, or I'm going to fight against this. I'm going to fawn, right? That's the people pleasing. I would say the fight could also be a little bit like the overfunctioning, the overgiving, the overdoing, not having boundaries. flight, I'm going to retreat. I'm never going to sell again. Or, oh my gosh, I didn't get the response I wanted. Or people said that this was too salesy. I don't know if people even say that. I got unsubscribes from my email list. That means I was too salesy. That means I'm taking this personal. I'm just never going to sell again, right? So that would be that flee response. What do we say? Fight, flight, freeze. Oh, and freeze. Or this is, I think, when we get into everything feels so heavy. It feels like we're overwhelmed. We can't think of anything. It feels impossible to move forward. Everything takes forever. I have one client, we talk about this quite a bit, when she is making her business personal and means something about her, it tends to make her freeze. And then we start creating these stories like, I'm not consistent in business, or I don't show up enough, or it's really, really, really hard for me to create content, or it's really, really hard for me to market and sell, when oftentimes it's really that response to making something personal. And because it then feels personal, and this means I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy, right? The reaction then is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and freeze would be everything feels really fucking hard to do. And I think this is so important to identify, because otherwise we try to solve problems in our business and go about them the wrong way. One, we think it has something to do with us and we need to fix us as the human, when no one needs fixing. Like, I feel like I'm probably, my clients are probably like, oh my gosh, Kim, like sometimes there's something I need to work on. But so often I'm like, I mean, you're not doing anything wrong. Like, I think we're so quick to blame ourselves and to think we have another block we need to clear. Not that there aren't things we need to clear or things we need to work on, but I think sometimes we can almost tip that scale a little bit too much when we're in the tendency of taking things on and making them personal. But it just helps, it prevents us from getting too neutral to actually look at what's going on in the business, which is then giving us feedback, right? And so then we can see, oh, this is either, again, about the person. It is personal, but it is personal to our audience, to the person in the sales process, and make it about what do they need, right? What is actually appropriate here? Or looking at the data in our business and that feedback there to see what is the appropriate response here. And usually what you will see is when you take out the response you would have when you make it personal, right? That fight, flight, freeze, fawn response, versus when we look neutrally at the feedback in your business and what the appropriate response there is, they are usually complete opposites. If you're making something personal about you in business and your response is to freeze and not do anything, if instead you're able to be really neutral and look at the feedback in your business, usually you'll see the feedback in your business is actually saying, I don't need you to freeze. If anything, I need you to show up a little bit more, to lean in a little bit more, to be a little bit more bold, to be a little bit more consistent, to share your thoughts a little bit more, to send that follow-up, to send that sales response. And so we can see it's often it's sort of like that opposite contrary action. And so I'm hoping this, again, let me know if you have questions around this, but this is one of those things that when I could see this, it just helped change everything, because I just saw how much I was really making things harder in business and got in my own way. My hair is doing weird things. I'm distracted by my own hair, y'all. Don't mind me. I can never get, sorry, I'm so distracted here. I need my ladies to tell me, because I know I have men who listen and watch too, how do I style this piece here so it stops flipping out like that? Let me know your secrets. But let me know if this is making sense there, because I think I really want to help land this, because what I've just found is it just helps simplify everything, and we can start to see how in business, it's so important that we identify and solve the right problem. And so often what I see through clients, and look, this is why we have coaching. This is why I take a holistic approach to business, and I don't just look at strategy. I look at the clarity and mindset side of things as well. What I see so often is when we're not getting the results we want, and it feels really confusing as to why, oftentimes it is because there is an aspect of our business that we are making and taking really personal, and we see that as the right problem to solve, as opposed to when we don't make it personal and we see business isn't personal, even if it feels personal, right? It is about the people we are serving in our audience, and then it's about that feedback we're getting. When we can instead look at that, it is always so much easier to get clear on what the right problem or problems to solve is, right? So if I go back to my example, if I'm so worried about posting in a Facebook group or what the Facebook group owner is going to think, or if I'm so worried that every time I sell, people are thinking I'm being super salesy, or if I'm so worried every time I share my results that everybody's going to hate me and think that I'm, bragging and that I'm full of myself and that I'm just like one of those coaches or whatever my noise used to be at the time then in my brain, if all of that personal stuff is going on, yes, I guess technically that's the thing to solve for because I need to address that. But if I think those are all issues, everything I'm doing then in my strategy is trying to solve for those issues. So I'm trying to figure out what's the way for me to own my work and to sell without ever sharing results or without ever sharing my thoughts or without ever taking up space. How do I show up and sell? How do I book clients without selling and making it seem like I'm selling anything, right? And so I'm really solving the wrong problem, and I'm making it so much harder on myself because I'm trying. How do I show up and market in another Facebook group? How do I do things with ensuring I will never piss someone off? I think most Facebook groups, people want you to post in there because that's the whole group point of them. But we can see how this then just makes everything harder than it needs to be, but it has us start solving the wrong things, right? Because then we're trying to learn or we buy into marketing that tells us there's a way to sell without seeming like you're selling or whatever the thing is there, as opposed to seeing, oh, what's actually true here is that none of this actually ever happened and no one ever actually said any of those things. I mean, it was all in my head. But let's just say someone had, what's actually true is I want to book some clients, and what my business is telling me it needs is it actually needs me to show up and own my work a little bit more. It actually needs me to lean in and to be a little bit more vocal about why I'm great at what I do. Oh, what it actually needs me to do is to be a little bit more clear that I have spots available and to sell those. What it needs me to do is to, follow up or to sell directly. It then just becomes very simple to see what the right next thing to do is. Or, oh, someone did take this really personally. That has something to do with them. And I get to decide, is that helpful feedback? Is it helpful feedback? And that, oh, isn't that interesting? I hit on something here. Is this something I need to talk about more? Do I need to give more context here? Or is this something I need to see? This is just the nature of being in business and dealing with other humans, and you're just going to have a segment of any audience that's going to project on you or need you to be, as Julia Wells says, the villain in their story. But again, it just helps you to start to see what the right thing to solve for in your business, and it makes business feel a lot more simple. When business feels confusing, more often than not, again, it comes back to oftentimes it's because we're making things very personal about us and mean something about us. And that's why it feels confusing, right? Because it's all of these muddy things we need to solve for. Usually, right, when we can separate from that, business itself is actually pretty simple. Or again, the next right problem to solve or series of problems to solve are a lot simpler. I think the other context here I will give, I think the other reason, quite honestly, some of us, I think this is very human, so don't make yourself wrong if you do this. I think this is like ongoing work for all of us to be able to create that separation. So I told you how long I've been in business. I just had a lot more practice at this. It is not what I did at the start of my business. Again, I have just gotten practice at it, and I now have, 6-7 years, however many years under my belt of like creating that separation there and not taking things on as personal. In fact, I had a client recently reflect that to me. She's like, it just amazes me, like how on a client session, she's like, I can bring all this stuff. And she's like, you just don't like take any of it on, and you're just so neutral, and it's so supportive because it makes me feel like I can bring this here and it feels like safe for me to process, but it also helps me feel like you can actually help me sift through this in a way where if you were taking any of this on, like it would just be so hard. And so, side note for any of you who are coaches, I think that's also helpful feedback as well. But again, I've had 5,000 plus one-on-one sessions at this point, probably more. I did the math on that like a year ago. So however many sessions I've just had also so much practice at this and creating that separation. So again, simple doesn't always mean easy. So I don't want anyone here making themselves wrong or making it personal about you, like there's something wrong with you if this is something that takes a second. But then I think, again, if you can just come back to this in your business, it will start to simplify what is your personal work, to use that word, right? That is just your work. Like I have a ton of personal work between like my traumas and just being human that I'm always working on. But it's been helpful for me to see when I do have something come up, this is my personal stuff, right? This is my trigger. This is my trauma. This is my anxious attachment. This is my anxiety. This is my high functioning PTSD, whatever that is. This has nothing to do with the business. This is something I just need to self-soothe or, do some work around over here, versus, what is neutral in the business and how can I take a look at that and remember any of this other stuff? Like, it really isn't about me. It really isn't about my work even at this point. Like, I inherently, again, I've been doing this for a long time, and so maybe this is easier said than done for some of you, but I think just something that over time you also start to learn, oh, I'm good at what I do. Especially if you've been in business for as long as me, I wouldn't still be doing this if I wasn't good at what I did. So like, that can't be the issue here. So even taking that on as something personal, not that we can't ever be human or make mistakes, and that's not what I mean at all, but I think, again, it just helps you to start to see what is, again, in air quotes, the right problem to solve, but also, what's the right thing to focus on. So if it does feel personal, that's just a highlight for you. Oh, what I actually need to pay attention to is my own personal mindset work, somatic work, healing work, self-regulation work, self-soothing work, right? If it doesn't feel personal, feels neutral, great. You're actually in your CEO role and mindset. Let me take a look at the business and let me take a look at the feedback and just see what that appropriate response is. If then when I'm looking at the feedback, I get jacked up and it starts to feel personal and I start to have a response that sounds like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? That is one of my patterns. That sounds like perfection or looks like perfectionism, people pleasing, over functioning, overthinking, retreating, stopping and starting, running away from something, hiding, wanting to, deciding I don't like this, whatever your particular flavor of that is. I have reverted back to making this personal. That is not actually what my business needs. That means I have reverted back to the personal stage. I need to go do the mindset, right? Like, this is like, you can keep going through this cycle, right? Like, I need to now go back to mindset work, self-regulation work, self-soothing work, go talk to my coach, go talk to my therapist, let me go process this out. Once I'm back to neutral and it's no longer personal, let me repeat this process all over again until I get to a response to the feedback that is actually a neutral, appropriate response for what it is, the feedback I'm looking at. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's literally how I think about things with clients quite a bit. If we're in a reactive mode, you can just pretty much guarantee whatever your response is or your reaction isn't going to actually be what your business needs from you at the time. I'm just, don't mind me with my hair twirling. I'm just seeing here. If I wanted to share, I think I gave you quite a few examples of how this shows up. If you want more examples, let me know. And I think I shared quite a bit about how this affects you with scaling and selling. So I was just going to talk about how to move through this. I would say here, this was the other piece. I'm just looking at my notes. The other piece so we talked about how, how this has you good into the fight, flight, freeze response, how this can have you solve around problems, how this can have you coach or serve clients less effectively. You don't have to be a coach. I think this can be true for, whatever type of work you do. And I would say, like, this is not just coaching. Like, I think about some of my designer clients or clients who, like, are OBMs. Again, when we're taking things and making things personal, we have to think about what happens then when we get into people pleasing, right? And we just start yesing people instead of giving them what we know from our expertise they actually need, or when we start fawning or when we freeze, right? It blocks our creativity. I think it makes it really, really hard for those of us who do any kind of creative work, which most of us are doing in our marketing, to think creatively when we're taking things and making things personal. I also think this is a big underlying cause for burnout. I think, look, yes, sometimes we can do too much in business and work too hard, but I've supported many clients through kind of unwinding from burnout in their business, and so often what is underneath it is either poor boundaries or what we're talking about here, right? They're holding and carrying a lot of emotional, almost like energetic boundaries, but emotional labor in terms of like what they're carrying and taking on. Or sometimes they are overworking, but a lot of times when we look at things, sometimes it's just strategic and not knowing what to focus on or do. It's like having the wrong business model or something like that. Like, sometimes it is all just strategy, but a lot of times, particularly with burnout, I see a lot of times it is also because there's been a personal response. I'm not good enough, and so therefore I need to overfunction, I need to overdeliver, I need to overdo, or I'm not good enough. And so I am a perfectionist and I overwork everything I do, so it takes me 10 times as long. So I don't feel like I have the capacity, right? So I think just seeing again how this piece here, the symptoms in which this can show up and how this can affect sales and scalability are quite massive, but the solution is very simple. For all of us, it might have different reasons for it, right? And our response or reaction to it might look different, but it comes down to, oh, I'm taking things really personally in my business. I'm making my business very personal when it is not. How can I take some of that, like remember that someone unsubscribing from your email list, someone leaving you a shitty comment, someone not liking your work, someone not buying your offer, not getting the cost per lead you want on your ads, not getting the launch sales you want, none of that is personal. And when you can see none of that is personal, you're able to put your CEO hat on and say, okay, so what's true here? If this were someone else's business and it wasn't personal, what would I notice here? What would I want to pay attention to? What would be the right solution? What would be the thing, the cause of these results or lack of results? What would I tell this person? And again, I think I said this already probably multiple times. One of the biggest places I see this really show up and kind of create a low grade impact negatively on your business over time is how, when we're making things and taking things really personally, we do or don't show up in our content. I talk a lot about taking up space, and I think it's almost become like an overused term at this point, but I'm still using it because I think I just haven't had a better way to describe it. I think we forget how much of marketing and how much of sales is not just about having the right strategy and doing the right things. Otherwise, everybody doing the same things would get the same results. And how much of it is about what we do in that strategy, right? I talked about this in Words That Sell, not just the specific words we say, but how we feel about them, how we embody them, how people feel the truth in those words from us, how we're walking our talk around that. Energy can feel like such a woo word, but really like the energetic imprint we bring to our work, and whether people believe that or not, whether they feel safe or not, whether they buy that or not, whether they trust us or not, and how much of that then comes back to, are we making and taking things personally or not? Again, not to say that your work can't be personal, but when we make things personal, if I am so worried about offending someone, having someone hate me, if all of my context is outward in instead of inward out, and outward meaning I'm so worried about my audience, the space, what everybody else thinks, and how I'm going to make and take that personally in my business, it is nearly impossible to show up in your messaging and in your marketing and in your sales in a way that is actually really effective and creates the results you want. And I would say that is one of the biggest shifts I saw for myself and my business. And again, what that took is me detaching from all of this is so personal. I need to worry so much about outside in instead of inside out. And not just like what I believe in myself, but literally the opinions of others, the projections of others, the fears of others, the people who don't like me. There's, like that is all a thing to contend with. But the more you can see, not just like, oh, because I think sometimes we talk about this in a way, like, can you handle it if it happens? And I like, can you handle it if someone doesn't like your content or if you don't get the sale? And I think, yes, that's part of it, but I think there's even this bigger way of that's really helped me just in seeing it in, again, it's just not personal. Like, the more I can see that, the more it just helps me to stay in my own lane, think my own thoughts, show up with conviction, own my work, and that changes, again, the trajectory of everything. It changes how you message, how you market, how you sell. Not the literal strategy and what you're doing, but how you show up within that strategy, which changes the results on the back end. I had another client reflect this, and I think just to kind of give some context here, we were talking about sales, and she was just reflecting the way I show up on coaching calls, and like the type of confidence I have, and the way I show up in a sales conversation, the type of confidence I have there. And that's what we're talking about here. I can't do that if I'm so taking every single thing personally, and I am hyper vigilant, y'all. Like one of my trauma responses or whatever, like I am hyper vigilant with a capital H. I think it's one of the things that makes me a good coach, but I have to be very mindful in terms of the context I give to what I notice. I mean, this is like an aside, but I think it'll make sense for everybody here. Hypervigilant, for those of you who don't know the term, I feel like that's such a coaching therapy term. It just means I'm very, very, very like on high alert and attuned to everything that is going on, to the degree I've had to really learn in my marriage to keep some of that to myself, because I will literally notice my husband's like mouth twitch a millicenter from like across the room, and I'm like, oh, something's up, and like that hypervigilance. And I've had to learn that it is quite annoying if I am always mind reading and in his space, because sometimes something's up and he doesn't want to talk about it, and sometimes he's just tired or his mouth is twitching or whatever the case is. It's the same in business, right? So I'm quite hyper vigilant. It doesn't mean like suddenly that's gone away. I've just had to really learn how to see. I have to be mindful of even my hypervigilance, right? Like when going back to the sales conversation, I can have a certain presence on a call, and I'm able to do that now because I can notice a lot, but I don't make it personal or make it mean something about me. Whereas probably the first year in business, I'm sure the first set of calls I had, when I noticed anything like that, I would take it personally. Like I would see someone's face like, oh, they don't want to work with me. Oh, they don't like me. Oh, like, you know, whatever that thing is, as opposed to being tuned into something and noticing, oh, sometimes when someone has a facial expression, like, yes, I'm noticing the right thing. Like, it doesn't make that go away. It doesn't mean that I don't notice that. That's actually still a superpower of me. The difference is when I don't make it mean something about me, right? When I can take the focus off myself and put the focus on the person in front of me, I can just get curious instead and I wonder what's going on here for them. Did something come up? Does this feel crunchy for them? Are they having a hard time making a decision? Are they in fear? Is this actually just their face when they're thinking something over, right? I can just get really curious instead. And so even with something like that, with what my client reflected to me, I think that level of because we were talking about like how this affects the way you show up on a call. I think it's important to say, yes, I think I show up very confidently. I'm in my power. I am very confident in my work, and I think people really feel that. That makes them feel safe, so it feels safe to work together, right? So you can see how that facilitates sales. And it doesn't mean like suddenly I'm not hyper vigilant anymore, or my brain has stopped doing the things it's doing. I've just created a different relationship and narrative to those things. So when I see something as someone who's hyper vigilant, I no longer think immediately, oh, what does that mean about me? What is the person? How do I make this personal about me, my business? Because usually when we do that, right, it's like, I mean, if you're going to make things personal in your business, make it mean something personal, like you are amazing and you're wonderful and everybody loves you. It's just most of us aren't doing that. So instead of that, I just see it as, oh, I did notice something, but if I'm not taking this personally, if I'm not making this personal, and instead I remember this is feedback in my business, or it is about the person I'm speaking to or in my audience, I can put the focus back on them and instead just get curious or take the appropriate response to that feedback. I hope this made sense for y'all, because this is just one of those things. I feel like it has been beyond game changing for me. Let's see, I had a couple of notes. I just want to be mindful of the time here because I do have a call after this. I'm just going to give you just a couple of things like to close this out and just what helped me integrate this. So again, what's helped me integrate this is a little bit, I talk with clients about this quite a bit, like just understanding what's our responsibility and what's someone else's responsibility, but also just what's mine and what's someone else's. And so what's mine is personal, and kind of what we were talking about earlier. When something is mine and it's coming up, it is my work to go deal with that. When it's someone else's stuff, right, it is just not personal. It doesn't mean as a coach I might not support them with them. It doesn't mean as someone facilitating sales I might not lean in and be curious about that. But it means that if it is someone else's stuff, my job is, as a responsible human being, to not create a codependent relationship or to, you know, fight, flight, freeze, fawn in my business. My job is to let someone have their stuff, right? I can hold space around their stuff. I can make room for their stuff. I can be curious about their stuff. But whether it's in a coaching conversation or the sales conversation, it is to let someone have their stuff, right? Like, and then I just get to have the appropriate response to that, to be curious about that. If it's a sales conversation, if it's coaching, to hold space around that or take that on. But again, understanding what's mine and what someone else's, keeping what's mine as my stuff to work about. But everything else, if it's someone else's stuff, I just get to give them back their stuff. And again, support, sell around it, lean in, be curious about it. My job, though, is not to take it on, right? That in some ways is a form of, I would say, codependency. Not to put labels on things, but it just helps my brain to see it in that way. And so again, to see it's just not personal. And like, how could it be? This was one of my notes here for y'all. I think this is just helpful. I think the more I do this work, and again, this is just easier for me because I've been on so many sessions. So I'll just let me give you the shortcut that has taken me however many years to learn. It is just normal for humans to have triggers, to have resistance, to project, to have messiness, to be mad, to get upset, to get angry. In your containers, whether that is coaching or design or you're an accountant or a lawyer, it is not okay for someone to be abusive or to take that out on you, right? That's different. But it is normal for humans to have those reactions. It is normal for humans to have those reactions on social media around content and things. And so again, the more you can see these are normal human behaviors, it doesn't always mean that they are self-evolved or that people are acting those out in appropriate ways, or that you have to be available for the ways they act those out, right? If I have a client who's abusive, for example, I'm going to let them go as a client, but I can also still see that isn't something personal about me, it's something personal about them and kind of where they're at and what's going on with them. So it still helps me to not take that on. But again, I think the more you can see things, as I was talking about this with a client yesterday, we were talking about something and I was like, whatever I said, I was like, oh, like, you know, like just being human. I think the more we can remember certain things that are human, the easier it is to also not make things personal or take things on personally in your business, and to notice when you're the human in the equation that's taking things on personally, so you can, you know, do whatever you need to do there to process that. Then just need one sip of my coffee. If you're not sure, just to kind of close this out, in terms of how the other place I will play with this, if you're not sure with, is this something I'm taking on and making personal, then I need to go do some mindset work, or is this really feedback I need to respond to? I just always like to come back to a really simple coaching question, which is, what am I making this mean? What am I making this mean? I got an unsubscribe. What am I making this mean? Someone said no to me. What am I making this mean? My launch didn't go the way I wanted. What am I making this mean? My ad cost is going up. What am I making this mean? What are some other stuff that comes up? I didn't get the likes I wanted on my content. What am I making this mean? I got shitty comments on this. What am I making this mean? Look at what am I making this mean and see your answer there. If it is anything about you and anything that is other than something very neutral about the business, that means you're making and taking it personally, which means that is not a problem to solve in your business. Or the first problem to solve in your business then is, how do you unwind from making this personal and make this mean something else so you can get back to neutral, to then look at whatever the feedback is that you just got in your business to see, is this even something that needs to be solved? And if so, what is actually the appropriate response there? But I promise you, whatever you're making it mean, if you make a response from what you're making it mean personally and try to use that response or reaction as the way to solve what is neutrally happening in your business, you will always overcomplicate things, and that'll never be the right solution. Even if you get a result, it'll be a result by making things harder than they need to be. Take it from someone who spent the first 3 years in business doing that. I have a much more easeful business now, and I would say I work less now, even though I hold far more clients now and probably put out more marketing now for this reason alone. It didn't mean me making things harder than they need to be and taking things personal never got me results. It did mean I made things so much harder than they had to be. All right, y'all. I hope this was helpful. You were very quiet, so hopefully you're just taking this in. But if you have a question now on the replay, drop it below. Again, if you're on my email list for the Vault, because this will drop as a podcast episode in the Vault, feel free to message me to an email if you have any questions around this. And if this is something you want support with, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, hearing this, I really see how this is a place I could use support, as well as then when I do get to neutral, understanding what is the right next step to take to get this, the results I want in my business, whether that's consistent 10K months or selling out your next launch or 100K months and everywhere in between. I work with brand new business owners who never sold anything before, and we're building out your offer and your marketing and your messaging and your sales process and funnel from scratch, to business owners who are already making multi-six figures and we're scaling to the $1 million plus mark. I love working with clients. I don't have a preference. I think sometimes people think I care about that. I genuinely love just business and supporting clients. So I love getting to meet you where you're at. That's why I love one-on-one, because it isn't one size fits all. I will drop a link for a free coaching consultation. I am currently fully booked. We are opening up. I think we still have a week-long summer strategy intensive for the summer. So I think we still have one of those. And then I'm looking at this actually with my coach this week to see if this makes sense. I'm toying with opening up one, maybe two more permanent coaching spots. Someone just grabbed one of the ones I didn't know if I was going to open up. So I guess that means one more. So I might have one permanent coaching spot opening up. And then of course, as every month goes on, most of my clients renew, but sometimes we have someone who doesn't renew and then we have a spot open up as well. So point being there is if you're looking for ongoing support, I would invite you to book a free coaching consultation sooner rather than later, since we don't have many of those spots open up and I don't know when the next one will open up, but for the right person, I am toying with that additional permanent ongoing spot. So you can convince me of that. All right, y'all, I hope this was valuable for you. I hope this was helpful. Again, I feel like this is one of those like nuanced concepts, but it feels so important to say like this has been probably the biggest game changer for me in business and just how I think about business and approaching business and solving things in business. So I hope it was as helpful for you as it was for me. I appreciate you being here. Like I said at the beginning, I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful to this business. And I hope, if nothing else, you can take from this conversation and kind of walk away just taking a moment to be grateful for this time we live in, state of the world aside, but just in terms of business and just that we get to connect on the internet and get to make money doing work that we are passionate about, that we believe is our purpose. Like what a gift. All right, I love y'all. I'm gonna be quiet now. Oh, and if you have hair tips, that is my vanity non-business stuff. How do I style this piece of my hair? Let me know. All right, I love y'all. Bye.